Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks, and welcome to episode 4 of Bionicle Retold, the show where I recap the entire Bionicle storyline from the beginning all the way to the end in chronological order. Today's chapter will be focusing on the 2001 and the 2002 areas of Bionicle's storyline, which actually were the first 2 years of the entire theme. What's really cool about this is that obviously, since we're going in chronological order, we understand all the background stuff from the prologue in chapters 1 to 3 that, if you were coming into Bionicle in 2001, was a huge mystery. This does come with a downside though. Again, major spoiler warning for the big reveals for the show. If you're just watching this for the first time for some reason and you don't want to get spoiled, definitely stay away now, because I have been and actually already have spoiled the major reveal behind the entire Bionicle storyline, which most fans didn't actually get to find out until 8 years into the theme. So if you want to actually experience Bionicle the way that it was meant to be told in the order that it was told from 01 to 2010, definitely go check out the video linked below where I actually explained how to get into the Bionicle storyline from the beginning. So it's definitely a way for you guys to experience the Bionicle story firsthand, the way that many original fans did, and not just get spoiled by me telling it in chronological order. But with that warning out of the way, let's just dive right into this episode, starting off with a recap of Chapter 3, Legends of Metru Nui.
Dystopia! Under the fist of Makuta Pterodax operating incognito as Taraga Duma, the great city of Metru Nui, or the brain of the robot, once a beacon of safety and light, has been transformed into a cruel surveillance state. Robotic and motionless Vaki patrol the streets, peering into the thoughts of the populace and making dissidents disappear. The brave Toa Metru fight back against the oppressive government, but are too late to stop Pterodax's evil plans. As a shadow is cast over the Great Spirit, the Matoran of Metru Nui fall into a deep slumber, losing their memories as the robot plummets from orbit into the oceans of Aqua Magna, causing catastrophic damage in a great cataclysm. In a pivotal battle between the Makuta and the Dark Hunters, a fragile, one-year peace with Pterodax is earned. And on the shores of their new home, the island of Mata Nui, the Toa Metru surrender their powers to awaken the Matoran, transforming into Taraga elders to mentor the next generation of heroes. This is Bionicle Retold. Chapter 4, Infection. Prologue, Aftermath of the Cataclysm. With the Toa Metru's courageous rescue of the Matoran of Metru Nui, Pterodax was left at a crossroads. He had succeeded in his plan to plunge Mata Nui into slumber, but without a workforce to be influenced and controlled, he was left the ruler of an empty city. True to his word, he left the island of Mata Nui alone for 1 whole year, during which the Matoran's memories of Metru Nui faded as they established their own unique culture, formed Matoran guard posts, and constructed villages across the island. All this time, the energized Protodermis continued to transform the island's wildlife and plant life, creating a vibrant island paradise full of danger and beauty. During this time, the corrupted Matoran Akmau ingratiated himself with the other villagers, integrating into society as a secret agent of Makuta, his mind filled with lies. 1 year after Pterodax's confrontation with Vakama over the Vahi, his attacks began in full force. From a shadow plague spreading across the land to infected Rahi turning vicious and assailing the Matoran, Pterodax did everything in his power to keep the Matoran in the dark and prevent them from rediscovering Metru Nui. This period came to be known as the Great War, where brave Matoran defended their homes against the feral Rahi, controlled by infected Kanohi masks which placed them under Pterodax's thrall. Elsewhere, 100 years into this dark time, the Matoran villagers of Voya Nui, the island which housed the Mask of Life, built a village on the shore of the island. It was named Mari Nui, and it brought joy into the tough life of the island's inhabitants. But this happiness was not to last, because during a great hurricane, the landmass containing Mari Nui sank beneath the waves. In a cruel twist of fate, the 6 Bohraki warlords had built a fortress of their own directly beneath Mari Nui, which was utterly destroyed during its descent.
Just a quick refresher from chapters 1, 2, and 3. So the Bohrok warlords were a group of people who tried to overthrow the Great Spirit Mata Nui during their time as rulers of the League of Six Kingdoms. Of course, this revolt was thwarted by Makuta Pterodax himself, and these people were sent to the Pit, which was the massive prison. Unfortunately, during the Great Cataclysm, the robot sunk into the seas of Aqua Magna and the pit was ripped open, which allowed all of its inmates to escape. During this time, the radiation from the energy source for the robot mixed in with the black waters of Aqua Magna, changing it into a mutagenic substance which transformed the Bohrok from prime beings who were the height of their power into these grotesque monsters. It also, however, did give them the ability to breathe underwater and made them resemble sea creatures, like Kalma here representing a squid.
The massive impact released air bubbles from the nearby airweed fields and encased the city, allowing the Matoran of Mari Nui to survive beneath the sea. During the brief time that these Matoran were exposed to the mutagen in the waters, their bodies became bigger and stronger, undoing much of Karzani the Mad Titan's works. After this catastrophe, the Mari Nui Matoran soon forgot their life on the surface and began their new life underwater, taming Hydruka beasts for air harvesting, building the Mari Nui fortress, and forming their first Matoran council. The Matoran began to be preyed on by the creatures led by the Bohrok, though they never knew the nature of their enemies. In the meantime, the war between the Dark Hunters and the Brotherhood of Makuta raged on, with some of the brutal, modified Skakti being drafted into the Dark Hunter force and seizing a Brotherhood fortress.
Quick refresher from Chapter 2, the Makuta experimented on the Skakti people, transforming them into brutal and violent warriors. Many of these Skakti warriors were actually drafted into the Dark Hunters due to their fighting prowess.
One of these Skakti named Zaktan found an encrypted record of Pterodax's plan. Zaktan then learned the intricate details of this evil plot and vowed to make use of that information. On yet another island in the universe, the Co-Matoran Mazika and his mentor worked as scholars on the Trenkron Peninsula, studying many fundamental questions about their universe and the nature of the Matoran species. Among their discoveries was the location and nature of the Makuta species, uncovering their secret antidermis forms.
Another quick recap from Chapter 2, the Makuta species evolved into a gaseous state. All of the Makuta that you see are actually robotic exoskeletons controlled by the Makuta spirit inside, which is called antidermis. For all intents and purposes, they are just like ghosts. They need to possess these mechanical skeletons to even move around and create actions. However, if they are outside of this armor for too long, the Makuta will die. So they essentially need a robotic skeleton so they can contain their antidermis essence inside the bones.
On this peninsula, a treacherous Matoran named Voltraz sought to obtain Mazeka and his mentor's research, murdering the mentor to gain the secrets of the Makuta for himself. In his grief, Mazeka vowed revenge on Voltraz, sparking a vicious rivalry between the two Matoran. In a grisly battle over a canyon of razor-sharp crystals, Mazeka impaled Voltraz on a spike, leaving him for dead. Knowing that Voltraz had devious intents and possessed knowledge of the Makuta, Pterodax sent one of his underlings, Makuta Gorast, to revive Voltraz and induct him as an honorary member of their ranks. Likewise, Mazeka was inducted into the Order of Mata Nui, who was given a job protecting the Matoran from deviants like Voltraz. During their conflicts, Mazeka saved a Matoran of Sonics named Krakua, who had also come to join the Order in time.
If you may recall from Chapter 3, Toa Vakama in Metru Nui received a vision of the future from a being known as Toa Krakua, Toa of Sonics, who warned him of many threats to come and told him of a future Toa team. Of course, the Matoran in the story named Krakua would become a Toa later on in the storyline, but of course it's just being seeded in right now, so in chronological order, you just keep remembering who Krakua is and how his path towards the Order of Mata Nui is going to take shape.
Part 1. A New Homeland. Welcome to the island of Mata Nui. A paradise home reclaimed amidst the darkness, Mata Nui was home to diverse, elemental climates, thanks to the transformative effects of leaking energized protodermis from the robot's power source. The region of fire, Tawahi, was home to a charred forest of burnt trees. In the center of a volcano, the great castle of Ta Koro was erected, the heart of Mata Nui. On the highest slopes of this volcanic mountain range was the region of Kowahi, an icy wilderness with a spectacular city hewn into the side of the mountain. This was the Kokoro village, with knowledge sanctums and passageways through the ice carved throughout the mountains. Moving downwards to the dense jungle at the base of the mountains was the region of Lei-Wahi, featuring the treetop village of Lei-Koro, home to the Matoran of Air who tamed mighty gecko birds as flying steeds. Connecting Lei-Koro to the center of the mountain was a great tunnel to Onu-Wahi, where an underground mining village called Onu-Koro stood firm as the refuge of the Matoran of Earth. As the tunnels reached the surface of the island, they branched off to Po-Wahi, a vast desert where the sculpture artists and craftsmen of Po-Koro, the village of stone, called home. And finally, stretching out from a great waterfall on the bay of Madanui was Ga-Koro, city of water erected on massive lily pads. The island home was named Madanui after the great spirit worshipped by the Matoran. Led by the former Toa Metru who now served as Turaga, the villages of Madanui lived in peace and harmony, united in their defense against the Makuta's Rahi forces. A tribalistic culture evolved on this remote island, with ancient tales of Madanui's battle with Makuta being told with rocks and stone. Above them in the sky soared the mysterious and ever-present Red Star, the booster pack satellite to the Matoran universe that was merely a mysterious celestial object to the Matoran. Most interesting of all, however, was that the island of Madanui held a secret. The base terrain was generated by the automatic camouflage system of the robot's faceplate, accidentally triggered during the Great Cataclysm. In the center of Madanui was a grand temple named Kini Nui, which unbeknownst to the Matoran was created and installed by the great beings during their construction of the Great Spirit's planetary exploration system. Upon landing on a foreign planet, the Kini Nui contraption would deploy from the face of the robot, using its spires as antenna-like sensors for Madanui, informing him of surface events while he was observing a planet. Deep within the Kini Nui was also a safe tunnel for members of the Matoran universe to enter or exit the surface of the robot, should passageways be needed to go back and forth. It was here that the Matoran carved out a life for themselves amidst the dark, and where our main story begins.
I just want to start off this chapter with a quick recap of Chapter 2. In a preemptive strike against the Brotherhood of Makuta, the Order of Madanui secretly stashed away several Av-Matoran, or Matoran of Light, in the hopes that the Brotherhood of Makuta would not realize where they went because they pose significant threats to the Makuta, who are beings of shadow. And since they're Matoran of Light, they could transform later on into Toa of Light, which would make them big threats against the Brotherhood. During this time period known as the Time Slip, the Order of Madanui took several Av-Matoran and scattered them across the Great Spirit Robot and Matoran universe, altering the color of their armor, although sometimes not always perfectly, as well as completely wiping their memories of ever being Av-Matoran or their previous lives. One of these Av-Matoran was named Takua. Right now, he believes he is a Ta-Matoran, despite his blue mask, which again was because he was an Av-Matoran, so they didn't really alter the colors correctly, kind of stands out on a Ta-Matoran, or Matoran of Fire, to have any blue components. Takua genuinely believes he is a Ta-Matoran. He's also the closest thing to a main character Bionicle has had throughout several different years, so definitely remember his name. He's secretly an Av-Matoran or Matoran of Light, but he doesn't know that at this point.
Over the many years of his life in Ta-Koro, Takua was dissatisfied with his work. Unlike his close friend Jaller, who was renowned for his fighting prowess and named captain of the Ta-Koro Guard, Takua was always more interested in exploration and adventure, rather than fighting or staying in one place. Seeing a steep decline in his work, Takua was banished by Turaga Vakama, who did this almost as a favor to Takua, who knew he would have a much more fulfilling life wandering around the island as a traveler. Over his many adventures, Takua met with each Turaga of each village, rescuing them from various traps set by Pterodax and gaining their trust. Over the course of these many adventures, Takua activated an ancient mechanism within the Kini Nui Temple, where a massive burst of energy shot forth from the temple and blasted him backwards, giving him a significant amount of head trauma and causing him to yet again lose all his memories. Little did he or even the Turaga know, but he had inadvertently reactivated the Toa Mata failsafe, summoning the 6 Toa canisters that held the Toa Mata, which had been aimlessly floating in the oceans of Aqua Magna. The legendary Toa would soon arrive, heralding the end of the Dark Time.
Just in case anyone is confused, at the end of Chapter 1, I described the Toa Mata, an elite team of Toa whose sole mission was to protect the Great Spirit and prevent him from any takeovers, kind of like what's happening right now. They'd been trained directly by the Order of Madanui, specifically Hydraxon, in order to defend Madanui from any attacks, and were sealed within special Toa canisters to launch from the heart of the robot in order to be immediately transported to any area that needed repairs. However, unfortunately, these Toa canisters malfunctioned during Makuta's takeover during the Great Cataclysm, and as such, the Toa canisters were launched all the way up into the air and crashed down into the ocean of Aqua Magna, where they would lay floating in dormant status for thousands of years.
Part 2. Quest for the Masks. The 1,000 years floating aimlessly in the ocean had taken a toll upon the Toa Mata. Their organic tissue had decayed over the years, leaving them in a state of disassembly. This long hibernation had also left them with amnesia, forcing to rely on external information while their memories slowly coalesced. And so, when Takua's actions in the Kirinui summoned the canisters to the island, the 6 Toa washed ashore on a golden beach, unaware of where or even who they were. They were the Toa Mata, separate and not yet whole. Tahu, Toa of Fire and leader of the group, awoke powerless on the beach until he donned his Kanohi Hau, mask of shielding. Just then a rush of energy came over him, and his elemental powers awoke. Sensing the heat and warmth of Takoro, he rushed into the charred forest. Mistaking him as a threat, Jaller and the captain of the guard attempted to trap Tahu, but before any major conflicts, Turaga Vakama stepped in, bowing to Tahu and encouraging Jaller and the guard to do the same. Meanwhile, Gali, Toa of Water, emerged in the bay near Gawahi. Immediately attacked upon her awakening by a monstrous reptilian Tarakava under the sway of Pterodax, Gali discovered that she wore the mask of water breathing, aka the Kanohi Kaukau, and controlled the element of water itself, fending off her attacker and swimming to Gakoro. Liwa, Toa of Air, headed straight for the treetop jungle of Leiwahi, feeling at home swinging from the branches as he discovered his mask power of levitation, the Kanohi Miru, and command over the element of air. Kopaka, cold and calculating Toa of Ice, cautiously explored his surroundings, using the Kanohi Akaku, the mask of X-ray vision, to scope out a Komatoran Matoro who had been spying on him from afar. Brought to Turaga Nuju, Kopaka was the first who began to understand their strange new situation. Meanwhile, Pohatu, Toa of Stone, had been discovered by a group of Pomatoran, and thanks to his friendly nature, had already introduced himself to the village of Pokoro, who hailed him as a hero. And Onua, wise Toa of Earth, stumbled upon a Matoran named Onepu in the caves of Onuwahi, who brought him straight to Turaga Wanua to be told of his purpose. Eventually, all 6 Toa Mata met with the respective Turaga of each region, who quickly realized these Toa Mata were out of practice, had forgotten their training, and needed to go forth on a quest to regain full control of their powers. Much like the Toa Metru themselves faced many trials and tribulations to learn to work as a team. And so, the Turaga sent the Toa Mata on a quest to discover 5 more masks that he had scattered across the island of Madanui for each Toa. With the special power to wear multiple Kanohi masks at once, and taking advantage of all their powers, these Toa Mata were especially equipped to seek out these masks, and gain all 6 mask powers throughout the whole team. Collecting all these masks had an added bonus. The Toa Mata had the ability to unlock special golden Kanohi masks, which had been forged long ago by Artaka himself to grant the Toa Mata the powers of all 6 great Kanohi at once. Specifically, these were the Kanohi Hau, Mask of Shielding, the Kanohi Kaukau, Mask of Water Breathing, the Kanohi Miru, Mask of Levitation, the Kanohi Akaku, Mask of X-ray Vision, the Kanohi Kakama, Mask of Speed, and the Kanohi Pakari, Mask of Strength. Each of the 6 Toa Mata began their quest with one of these 6 masks for each of them, and they each had to collect all 6 for themselves to unlock their golden Kanohi. Setting off on his quest, Pohatu Toa of Stone sped through the icy landscape of Kowahi on the hunt for his next mask. In his hurry, he barreled into the irritable Toa Kopaka at super speed, who saved them both from an avalanche. With Kopaka reluctantly agreeing to let the friendly Pohatu travel with him, who insisted they'd be more efficient as a team. This began the start of one of the most enduring friendships in the story of Bionicle. On the cliffs of Mount Aihu, Pohatu and Kopaka stumbled upon the rest of the Toa Mata, who had finally gathered together as one to get to know one another and discuss their quest. Despite Tahu and Onua arguing to stay together, the Toa split apart. Just then, a large earthquake rocked the earth and the ground split, with rain and hail falling around them. The Toa realized this was the work of Makuta Pterodax and immediately began a search for their masks. Meanwhile, Takua awoke on the shore of Tawahi, disoriented and confused. Observing the events from afar, a panicked Gamatoran named Maku summoned him, asking if he had seen Toagali. The village of Gakora was under attack by the vicious Tarakava Rahi, as Pterodax had seized the opportunity to assault the village and test the strength of the Toa one by one. Takua arrived in Gakoro by boat to find a capsized house, which he worked hard to bring back to the surface and rescue Turaga no Kama and the rest of the Gamatoran. As the terrified Matoran fled, Takua watched as the powerful Toagali emerged from the ocean, trading blows with the Tarakava and pushing it back in a great struggle. And so, over the course of many months, these Toa embarked on their great quest for the masks, sometimes working together, sometimes alone. During this time, Takua continued to wander around the island of Madanui, his memory slowly returning as he learned more and more about each village. In the stony village of Pokoro, Takua encountered the entire populace in the grip of a plague, which he discovered had been spread by infected Koli balls, rocks used in a popular sport native to that region. Rescued by Toapohatu from the grips of some vicious Rahi scorpions, Takua realized the source of the disease was Akmau, the devious Pomatoran who had conspired with Pterodax to infect the population of Pokoro. His treachery revealed, Akmau pleaded innocence and fled the city for a time. After further adventures and many friends made, Takua found himself in the treetop village of Leikoro, which was under ambush by the insectoid Nui Rama Rahi, controlled by Pterodax to test the fortitude of Toa Liwa. In a stunning attack, Liwa was defeated by the swarm of insects, with his Kanohi mask replaced with an infected Miru, placing him under Pterodax's thrall. In the ensuing battle, the lay Matoran riding Gukko birds were brought down and captured by the Nui Rama. And so, in a climactic battle, Onua Toa of Earth bursts through the walls of the nest, battling Liwa one-on-one and finally managing to free the Toa of Air from his mind control. As this was happening, the other four Toa Mata continued their quest for the masks, also discovering and collecting the hidden Makoki stones in the process to gain knowledge about their enemy, the Brotherhood of Makuta. The first sparks of conflict began to fly between the Toa, with Tahu lighting an entire tree on fire to retrieve one single Kanohi mask, much to the dismay and anger of Gali, who had seen him destroy the habitat of several nesting birds. At the same time, Takua continued to meet new Matoran, like Matoro, translator to Turaga Nuju and keeper of the Turaga's secrets, and Nuparu, chief engineer of Onukoro. Of course, he continued to stay in close communication and contact with his friend Jaller, captain of the Takoro Guard. Along his journeys, Takua encountered the mighty Toa as they fulfilled their own quests, witnessing epic battles and even assisting some of them in uncovering mysteries and claiming their own masks.
So just a quick note here, the story content that's being covered right now was featured in a game called the Madanui online game. This was many fans' very first introduction to Bionicle all the way back in 2001 and is considered to be one of the best examples of Bionicle storytelling. It was essentially a choose-your-own-adventure game where you played as Takua as he explored throughout Madanui, going to the different villages and meeting different characters and essentially witnessing the story of the Toa from a second-hand view. It was a really, really great game that unfortunately I've kind of had to gloss over really quickly in this analysis, especially because there's so much content to get through. So definitely if this interests you, if the world seems interesting, you can actually play the Madanui online game on a website called Biomedia Project, which I've linked below in the description. So feel free to download it and check it out. It's one of the best pieces of Bionicle content ever, and I feel really bad for summarizing it in a few sentences.
Part 3. The Void. Finally, after months questing for the masks, the Toa Mata successfully collected their 6 masks of power. As they headed for the great temple of Kininui in the center of the island to claim their powerful golden Kanohi, Makuta Pterodax rallied his forces for a counterattack, sending his infected Rahi in swarms to assault the temple. But the Matoran were ready, and years of defending their villages had sharpened their combat skills. In his many journeys, Takua had assembled a group of Matoran from each village to fight alongside him. Known as the Chronicler's Company, they held back the Rahi long enough for the Toa to claim their golden masks and descend into the Makuta's lair beneath Kininui, in the passageway from the face of the robot to the deserted sphere of Metru Nui. As the Toa descended into darkness, the Chronicler's Company, aided by Jallers, captain of the guard, and Onukoro's Usuri forces, fought on. Upon entering the gate to Mangaya, the Toa were attacked by two Manus crabs, powerful infected Rocky that served as personal guardians of Pterodax's lair deep within Mangaya. Just then, the Toa recalled ancient visions they had seen along their journeys, urging them to remember who they were and merge together into the powerful Toa Kaida. Tahu, Pohatu, and Onua combined their energies to transform into the towering Toa Kaida Akamai, Avatar of Valor, while Liwa, Gali, and Kopaka merged to form the Titan Toa Kaida Wairua, Avatar of Wisdom.
Now, look, I know what you're probably thinking. What on earth are these, and why did they just come out of nowhere? Well, unfortunately, the thing is, since I'm having to summarize this story relatively quickly, a lot of the story seeds that hinted at this being possible were just kind of glossed over. So let me just give you the quick and dirty version of it. Essentially, every inhabitant of the Matoran universe has the power to form a Kaita, which is the Bionicle form for a combination or some sort of greater being. So these Toa Kaida are actually three Toa coming together, Tahu, Onua, and Pohatu forming this one, and Liwa, Kopaka, and Gali forming the other one. This ability was programmed in by the Great Beings to allow certain members of the universe to form together, essentially combining their collective force to solve any problem which required, say, physical strength or extreme unity. And yes, you may have guessed this already, but these are essentially these set combiner models, which honestly I think is something that's pretty cool, because in-universe, you're literally combining three of the sets, just as you are in the set form themselves to make these larger Titan characters.
Fully powered up in their Kaida forms, the Toa struck back against the Manus crabs, utterly defeating them and clearing the path to the lair of their ultimate enemy, Makuta Pterodax. Just then, a wave of destruction swept across the Toa Kaida, separating them back into their original forms. Before they got a chance to confront Pterodax himself, 6 shadowy figures emerged from the walls, mirror reflections of the Toa Mata themselves. Despite fighting valiantly, the Toa realized that these shadow reflections were perfectly matched to themselves, and the true test was to accept that darkness, hatred, and evil was as much a part of them as any sentient being. By acknowledging their shadow counterparts were a part of them, the Toa were able to absorb them into themselves, ending the threat and proceeding to confront Pterodax. In the meantime, with the combined efforts of Takua's Chronicler's Company, the Takoro Guard, and the Onukoro Asuri, the Rahi were beaten back, and there was finally a period of peace outside the temple. In this lull in the conflict, Turaga Wanua was escorted to the surface, giving Takua a tip about a secret passageway into Mangaya from Onukoro, so he could watch the Toa battle Pterodax and tell the tale of their exploits. And so, as Takua descended into the tunnels, the Toa Mata entered the final chamber, ready to face Pterodax. In the center of the room, a swirling vortex of robotic components and objects faced the Toa. A Matoran, pitted and rusted with an infected mask, walked out to them, blank eyes staring from empty sockets. This was Makuta Pterodax, who had taken the guise of a Matoran to taunt the Toa, hinting at the true nature of his power. As the Makuta faded back into the vortex, dark tentacles lashed out at the Toa, who were beaten back no matter what they tried. Slowly, the Makuta ceased his attack and gazed down at his defeated opponents. In a final rally, the Toa mustered together their elemental powers and sent a wave of energy at the vortex. But before they could truly defeat Makuta, he faded away, his voice echoing through the room that they could never defeat the Void. All this conflict and buildup was merely a test by Pterodax to see how skilled the Toa Mata truly were. Satisfied by his test, Makuta retreated deeper within Mangaya, readying his next plans. But so as the Toa were transported back up to the surface of Matanui, Takua was left behind, surrounded by the discarded parts and damaged rubble from the battle. Instead of taking the path back to the surface, he noticed a separate passageway, a secret tunnel to a massive subterranean network of hives and pods. In fear, Takua watched as creatures within the pods began to stir, slowly awakening the horrors within. Barely managing to escape through an automated portal system, Takua was ejected onto the beach of Matanui, still reeling from the battle he had witnessed and unaware of the threat to come. Little did he know, but the discovery of this hive signaled Makuta Pterodax's next attack, and peace would be short-lived. Part 4. Terror of the Swarm. Weary after their recent fight with Pterodax and uncertain of his next plans, the Toa Mata emerged onto the surface of the Kininui Temple. Before a moment's chance to breathe, a Matoran burst from the shrubbery, terrified and traumatized from a mysterious attack. he would only utter one word from his mouth, over and over again: Bohrok.
Recap from chapters 1 and 2. As you probably know by now, everything that's happening within the Matoran universe is occurring in the body of the Great Spirit Robot, which is a colossal robot the size of a planet that can actually lay down on the surface of a planet underwater and have a cloaking camouflage system on its face. Essentially, every time this Madanui robot wants to survey a world, it just lays flat and lets its face stick out above the water. The cloaking is actually pretty cool. Essentially, the metal faceplate of the robot is covered by an artificial layer of foliage and sand, which allows it to stay hidden during its procedures. However, the main thing is that once it is time to take off, as I mentioned in the previous chapters, there is a full-on cleansing mechanism to wipe all of this foliage and sand off of its face. To do that, the Madanui robot employs these small robots called Bohrok, whose task is literally just to cleanse the surface of the face of the robot, which of course now is the island Madanui. The Bohrok also have a secret. As I mentioned in chapter 2, all Avmatoran who achieve their destiny, like our friend Takua here, transform into Bohrok. So essentially, at any point, an Avmatoran could be transformed into a Bohrok should they be needed to be called upon by the Swarm. This also wipes all of their memories and personality, leaving behind only a robot which is a husk of its former selves. It's a pretty effective way of using the Matoran universe's own inhabitants to be the cleansing mechanism, just in case any Bohrok get damaged while repairing the surface of the face. So that way you can just take some Avmatoran and replace them.
Deep within the catacombs of Madanui, Makuta Pterodax uncovered an ancient mechanism to prematurely awaken the Bohrok, triggering their cleansing protocols to wipe the face of Madanui clean.
Remember back in chapter 2 when Makuta Mutron bridged his mind with the horrible entity Tren Krom and discovered the secrets of the Matoran universe? Well, if you don't, that's why I'm here. When he relayed this information to Makuta Pterodax, not only did it lead to Pterodax's revolt and eventual takeover of the Great Spirit Robot, but it also led to one crucial piece of information. Pterodax discovered exactly how to prematurely activate the Bohrok cleansing system, which is why he knew how to do all this in the first place.
And so all over the island, thousands of Bohrok with unique elemental abilities awoke with a singular mission. Tanakh with fire abilities burnt large swaths of forests, with Galak summoning flood tides and Parok shattering stone foundations. Levok used acid attacks to channel dangerous streams of poison, while Korok manipulated the element of ice to weaken even the hardest of substances. Finally, the dangerous Nuvok tunneled deep within the ground, hollowing out sinkholes and swallowing entire villages whole. While the Bohrok were all simply mechanical shells, the real danger were the Krana, the brains of the Bohrok. Created by the Great Beings by exposing Matoran remains to energized protodermis, the Krana controlled the hive mind of the Bohrok and had the unique ability to control any inhabitant of the Matoran universe when placed on their face. Through a unique technical interface designed by the Great Beings, Krana could override the base programming of any Matoran or even Toa to use their powers to accomplish the cleansing task. And finally, deep within the robot itself lurked the Bohrok Queens, controllers of the Bohrok and directors of the hive mind. As an extreme security measure, the nest of the Bohrok was sealed shut, with the only way to bypass the seal and override the hive mind being a complex mechanism requiring 48 different Krana from each of the 6 Bohrok types.
As you might be able to guess, these Krana were the main collectibles for the year of 2002, and boy were there a lot of them. You see, each of these 6 types of Bohrok had 8 different Krana, and each of those 8 had 2 different forms based on whether they were active or dormant. So really, that's a lot of Krana in total. The other thing that I want to make very clear here is that the members of the Matoran universe at this point do not know that they're living inside a giant robot. So while they kind of have an understanding that Krana are used to control the Bohrok based on some sort of hive mind, they don't really understand where the Bohrok came from, why their mission even is to cleanse the surface of the island, or that they were once Avmatoran. Really, all they know is that the Bohrok are trying to destroy their homes, which is pretty unfortunate because it is supposed to be something positive for the Great Spirit Madanui to cleanse its face, but Pterodax triggered it early, which is causing all this problem.
Meanwhile, as the Toamata rushed to Takoro to save the village, they found it overrun by Bohrok, released by Makuta Pterodax immediately after their confrontation in Mangaya. The Toa were surprised to see that unlike the Rahi or Makuda's other pawns, the Bohrok made no moves to attack or harm them at all. They would simply defend themselves if attacked. Nevertheless, the Toa sprung to action, Gali and Liwa combining the power of water and air to create an immense cyclone that swept through the first wave of Bohrok, leaving only the Krana behind. Turaga Vakama then emerged from the shadows and shared his knowledge of the Bohrok with the Toa, explaining that they needed to seek out 48 different Krana to unlock the hive and shut down the invasion. And so, the Toa set off on a two-pronged quest to delay the destruction of Mana Nui, while disabling and collecting each Krana to put an end to the Bohrok threat. Part 5. The Bohrok Wars. Over the course of several months, the Matoran and Toa staged a brave fight against the relentless Bohrok hordes. An Onu Matoran engineer named Nuparu created a genius invention in a bind. Scavenging destroyed Bohrok parts, he created the Boxor and burst through the tunnels of Onuwahi, devastating Bohrok as he went. Throughout this struggle, Pokora was invaded and its entire population evacuated to Gakuro in a major upheaval. All along the way, Takua followed the Toa on their quest, chronicling their actions and heroic deeds. In the treetop village of Lekoro, disaster struck. In a surprise attack and conversion from the Bohrok, nearly the entire population, including Turaga Matau, was assimilated by the Bohrok's Krana, becoming slaves to the hive mind. Despite his lone attempts to free his village, Toa Liwa also succumbed to the Krana, then confronting Onua deep within the jungle. The wise Onua laid his weapons down, telling Liwa that his will was stronger than the Krana, and he should prove himself worthy of being a Toa. Tearing off the Krana from his face with all the willpower he could summon, Liwa overcame this obstacle, and together with Onua, Nuparu's Boxor vehicles, and even the help of Takua and Captain of the Guard Jaller, freed the village of Lekoro. Finally, with all 48 Krana collected, the Toa agreed to descend to the Bohrok nest and end the threat of the Bohrok once and for all. And so, as they journeyed into the depths of the nest, the Bohrok readied to wipe Gakuro off the face of the map, taking the evacuated population of the Po Matoran with it. The brave Jaller and Takua led the Matoran counterattack, defending Gakuro from the ever-increasing threat. Despite the efforts of the Matoran and Nuparu's Boxor inventions, the threat was dire, and with the Toa deep underground, the Matoran were fighting a losing battle. Meanwhile, as he traveled deep into the tunnels, Tahu grew wary of Liwa, suspicious that he was still influenced by the power of the Krana, although Onua had faith in his fellow Toa's willpower. But so, after facing many trials to strive towards the center of the nest, Liwa proved his allegiance time and time again, and the Toa finally made it to the center of the hive. Placing their 48 Krana on the slots in the floor, they unlocked the inner nest, opening 6 passageways into the dark. Within these tunnels, the Toa Mata discovered mighty Exo-Toa suits of armor, remnants of the great beings as a failsafe against the Bohrok.
These Exo-Toa may actually seem pretty familiar. It's because that throughout the Brotherhood of Makuda's actions in chapters 1 to 3, they actually use these Exo-Toa to replicate the strength of a Toa and fight in their armies. Essentially, the Exo-Toa can either be worn as a suit by a current Toa to power up their abilities, or they can operate on their own as robotic shells, and can even be controlled by Makuda.
Pressing on, the Toa Mata, now wearing full Exo-Toa armor, finally encountered the Bohrok, queens of the Bohrok swarms and controllers of the hive mind. In a vicious fight against the Bohrok, the Toa nearly faced defeat, with their strongest members trapped fighting illusions projected by the queens, and the remaining Toa barely being able to use their elements against their opponents. Just then, Tahu realized that while the Exo-Toa armor gave them incredible strength and fighting abilities, it also consumed and hindered their elemental power, which was the key to the Bohrok's defeat. And so, in a climactic blast, the Toa sealed the Bohrok in a cage of protodermis, disabling their connection to the swarm. Without the Queen Hive Mind, Bohrok all over Mana Nui were rendered aimless, and the attack on Gakuro ceased. At that moment, all around the island, 6 Toa Suvas, shrines to the Toa and mysterious technological bastions shone with light, and mysterious symbols appeared atop each of the Suva. Turaga no Kama, awed, told the Matoran that the Toa had succeeded, and the threat of the swarm was over. Back in the nest of the Bohrok, the Toa felt a rumbling beneath their feet. As the floor gave way, the Toa Mata were thrust into tubes of bubbling, energized protodermis.
You might recall this from the prologue, but energized protodermis was the mysterious substance that had the incredible power to create, transform, or even destroy. This was the substance that sparked the core war and arguably the entire Bionicle story itself, because it was the major resource being fought over in Spherus Magna.
Submerged within the mysterious energized protodermis, the Toamata were physically transformed, evolving into beings far more powerful than any Toa in existence. Armed with powerful new masks, weapons, and solid protodermis armor, they became the Toa Nuva, rising from the ground in their striking new forms. As boulders of earth rained down upon them, Tahu Nuva activated the power of his Hau Nuva, the Mask of Shielding, and was surprised to discover that he had shielded not only himself, but his entire team. As the Toa slowly came to the realization that their new forms allowed them to share mask powers amongst each other, Liwa activated the Mask of Levitation, the Miru Nuva, while Puhatu used the Mask of Speed, the Kakama Nuva, to propel this newly transformed Toa team from the depths of the hive back out to the surface. In Gakoro, with the fight over, the Matoran busied themselves with repairing the land. Krana were harvested and placed in a massive pit where they could not infect any more minds. With the mindless Bohrok now acting as mere robots, Matoran were able to use their powerful forms to reconstruct what they had destroyed, the Bohrok acting as a force for creation rather than destruction. In the aftermath of the battle, Takua and Jaller enjoyed a brief moment of respite, celebrating with the Ga-Matoran and Po-Matoran, specifically Huki, who was leading the Po-Matoran guard, as well as Holly, one of their Ga-Matoran companions. Looking out to the ocean, Takua was thankful for the end of the Bohrok Wars, but was unaware of the danger lying ahead, and how this was only the first stage in Pterodax's plans to overthrow the Great Spirit and seize the Matoran populace for himself. But that's for next time, and this wraps up Chapter 4, Infection. Stay tuned in 2 weeks for Chapter 5, Light, where the new Toa Nuva would face more danger than ever before, and a prophesied new hero would arise. This was Bionicle Retold.
Alright, and with that, we've about summed up the entire Bionicle storyline for Chapter 4, which covered 2001 to 2002. Definitely stay tuned for next video for the future chapter coming out, which will delve deeper into some more interesting territory, specifically throughout the year of 2003. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions at all. If anything was not clear, I will do my best to help out in the comments. And be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO and Bionicle news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. As always, the next episode of Bionicle Retold will be hitting my channel in 2 weeks, so stay tuned for that. Thank you all for tuning in, and bye-bye for now.